Due to the graphic nature of this program, listener discretion is advised.
Not me, Lois. Shoot him. I'm the real Peter.
I don't know.
Lois, look at me. You know your own husband, don't you? Thank God. You made the right choice, honey.
What was that?
Nothing.
So, hands up all those who think Skynet will happen during their lifetime. How long until the robot revolution will begin? Or maybe it won't even get that far. Maybe robots and AI will manage to take over while humanity is busy watching YouTube videos and making TikToks. Like and subscribe! Why am I talking about the robot apocalypse? Well, because we need to wake up, people! Oh, wait, sorry, wrong script. 1 second, hang on. Okay, yeah, no, here we go, okay. Why am I talking about the robot apocalypse? Well, because we need to wake up, people! And I gotta pad out this script somehow. But also because this is the story of one man who was way ahead of his time when it comes to the replaced by robots conspiracy theory, and like many who believe these kind of ideas, it doesn't end well. Are you sitting comfortably? Please select all the images which have metal in them to prove you're not a robot, and let's begin. Valentine's Day, a day for people around the world to appreciate each other, express their affection for each other, have a romantic day, and generally revel in their romantic relationships. Unless you're chronically single, bitter, jaded, and cynical like me, in which case you note the date with a casual, "Oh, yeah," and then spend the remainder of the day hating every couple I see holding hands while being eternally grateful I don't live in Paris or some other city of lovers.
Moving on.
And it was on Valentine's Day, that's the 14th of February for those of us who don't give a fuck, in 1933 that Darlee Kracht was born in Des Moines, Iowa. Some years later, the Kracht family relocated to San Diego in the state of California, where Darlee attended Coronado High School. She was a member of the band, the Honor Society, various clubs, and voted Girl of the Month by her peers when she graduated in 1951. She met a man named Donald Leroy Struebing who was enlisted in the Navy, and the two married on May 17, 1953 at their local Methodist church. In 1965, Darlee and Donald adopted a 1-month-old boy who had been born on November 26th and named him Kurt Allen Struebing. When Kurt was in 7th grade, about 12 to 13 years old for those of us on the metric system, the family relocated to Seattle, where Donald began working as an aerospace engineer for Boeing while Darlee was a stay-at-home mom. Darlee had a very close relationship with her son, but Kurt and his father had been having problems. Donald was a verbally abusive alcoholic who wanted Kurt to be an athlete, but Kurt was more interested in rock music, which his father detested. So, in typical teenage rebellion fashion, Kurt started to learn to play the guitar and transitioned into listening to heavy metal around 1978, proving that classic rock truly is a gateway genre. Despite the problems between father and son, Kurt believed their small family was doing well enough, so it came as something of a shock when, one day in 1981, his father suddenly moved out and Darlee and Donald officially divorced on December 4th, 1981. Darlee and her son remained close, however, and quickly settled into their new life. They lived at 1701 Federal Way in King County, and Darlee got a job as a dating processor for the Pacific Northwest Bell Telephone Company. She watched her son graduate from Thomas Jefferson High School with a 2.8 grade average. While Kurt had suffered a few bouts of depression during his high school years, I mean, who hasn't? These weren't long-term, and he seemed to shake them off fairly easily. After high school, Kurt had a few random jobs. He worked in a few restaurants, a warehouse, and as a phone solicitor, which is a fancy way of saying telemarketer. Kurt had moved out, but wasn't able to afford the cost of living doing those menial jobs, and so he moved back in with his mother in July of 1985. See, kids, the cost of living crisis isn't just a recent phenomena. Everything old is new again.
Well, it's retro.
Yeah, retro.
At some point, Kurt met bassist Scott Tinsley and drummer Steve Meyer. Along with an unknown fourth, they formed the band Night Prowler, a name they took from an AC/DC song. They had a black metal sound and an obsession with the Evil Dead movie. They released their first demo in 1983 under the title Eat Death, which featured as the album cover a shot from the Evil Dead movie, and released a second demo, Back for Seconds, in 1984. However, things weren't working out too well with their vocalist, and they were looking for someone new. Luckily, Brian had put an advertisement in The Rocket, a free music magazine that serviced the Seattle area, looking for members to join his band, which had a total number of one member, Brian. The ad was spotted by Kurt, who decided to give him a call. Kurt called Brian up and suggested that instead of Kurt joining Brian's band, Brian should come try out for his. So he agreed, they set a date, and according to Brian, they just clicked. Love at first jamming session. With a new vocalist and a direction of sound, in 1985, Night Prowler decided to rebrand as NME. Now, I want you to brace yourselves, as I have uncovered something phenomenal here. For many years, rumors and whispers have circulated the internet, speculating and insisting on what NME stands for. Articles and fans alike have claimed that it stands for No Mental Effort, New Metal Express, No More Enemas, New Messiah Emerging, and pretty much any other acronym you could possibly come up with. Well, thanks to my in-depth research, I can finally put this one to rest. Drumroll, please. I can tell you definitively that NME stands for nothing, just abso-fucking-lutely nothing. It's just a cool way of spelling enemy. Did you enjoy all that build-up for no payoff? As is usually the case, a photo shoot for the new band was quickly arranged. Scott, Steve, Brian, and Kurt decided they wanted to try something a little different with their shoot, though. I'll let Brian tell the story.
There's the photo.
Yeah, that's not as good as the... I'm hoping you've seen the hand-holding photo somewhere.
I'm not sure which one. Oh, yeah, of course. Here it is.
Oh, there it is. Yeah, that's the best one.
Talk about this
we
photo
did
shoot.
Both of those at a local... This photo shoot was done at one of these... used to have lots of photography studios where you just go in and get your family photos and stuff. And we decided we were going to do the band photos there. And I don't know who came up with this. It was probably Scott or Kurt. But we thought it'd be funny as hell if we were holding hands like we were perhaps more than friends. Because back in the day, it was kind of a funny thing. So, but it's still classic. And then Scott's got his 2 cigarettes hanging out of his mouth. So that was nice. But, look all badass holding hands. That should have been the album cover right there.
Yeah.
Would you have bought that if that was the album cover?
Yeah, why not?
People would have been like, what in the hell's that shit? Might have sold more. The photographer was very confused by what we were doing because there were some shots that got lost that were they had like leaves in the background, like a forest background, but it wasn't like cool black metal. It was like autumn, happy pumpkin carving type of stuff. Sad thing is when Kurt passed away, all of his stuff got I think the master recordings and a lot of photos and band stuff just got tossed somehow. So it's a shame that this stuff never resurfaced, because those were pretty funny.
Kurt's plan for Enemy was just to have it as something fun to do. Play a few gigs, write a few songs, record an album or two. However, that didn't mean he didn't have plans. Enemy would book any gig anyone was willing to offer them, which likely made for some interesting shows and lineups. They recorded a demo tape called Machine of War, which did well enough for the group to wrangle an agreement for a recording contract with the now defunct LSR Records, a subsidiary of the now defunct Dutch East India Trading Company, which took them into the studio to create their first album, Unholy Death. I was able to find out a few bits and pieces regarding the creation process for the album and wanted to share. Vocalist Brian's enunciation on the track Brick Wall was so terrible due to him having been handed the lyric sheet moments before recording, which is rather apropos given the entire process was rather slapdash. Kurt would float ideas he wanted to try out on the way to the studio, and they'd give it a go, experimenting with the songs as they recorded them, creating a record that is a very odd duck in many ways. Even the band admitted that the songs were good, but the mix was terrible and the album doesn't sound all that good, and yet is beloved, especially when the remastered edition was later released. Short version, this is an album of contradictions, which is fitting given it's a fusion of thrash and black metal with a sprinkling of punk for that extra music tang. As well as all this music stuff, Kurt had a flair for art, graphic design, and lettering. It wasn't uncommon for someone to make a joke and for Kurt to instantly have some sort of graphic to go with it a short time later. So Kurt was the one who designed all of the album artwork, flyers, and band shirts for the group. A huge staple of the 80s, and indeed physical media era in general, stupid digital ruining it for everyone, physical media forever. was the compilation album. Maybe I'll fall down a rabbit hole and do a video about this one day, but short version, Spotify playlist compiled by someone else onto a vinyl record for mass production and release. Enemy made it onto this amazing gem of a compilation album, Satan's Revenge, which was a massive opportunity for them to get some added attention. Or it would have been had the song featured on the album been pretty much any track except Of Hell. What's the problem, I hear you ask? It may be a short track at just over 2 minutes, but so what? At least it's there. Well, let's just save us all some time and listen to a bit of the track, shall we? Band, then yeah, that would totally be appropriate, but otherwise, not so helpful. I have no idea why the people who created this album thought this would be a good choice to represent Enemy, especially since Enemy had plenty of other songs that are just as short. That'd be the punk influence, definitely not the black metal influence. I don't know, I reckon this whole album was thrown together by nothing but a bunch of corporate monkeys.
Yeah, I'm not proud of that.
Unholy Death was released to wide acclaim, or at least as wide as one could receive for an obscure underground band in the 80s. Guitarist and everyone's favorite metalhead to hate, Euronymous of Mayhem, often cited Enemy's Unholy Death as a great inspiration, and the expectation was that Enemy would go on to a stellar career. Unfortunately, expectations rarely match reality. Almost as soon as Unholy Death had hit the shelves, Kurt was laying the groundwork to promote their next album, an EP with the working title Rites of Self-Destruction, which he said would have new songs as well as feature covers of Black Sabbath's Children of the Grave and Led Zeppelin's Immigrant Song. Poor Zeppelin, just can't get away from that heavy metal label no matter how hard they try. And which he said would be released early in 1986. But best laid plans and all of that. Up to this point, Kurt had been recreational doesn't quite cover it, but he wasn't a full-blown addict. He was a drug user. There, that'll do. According to his own report, Kurt had tried using amphetamines about 30 times, LSD 5 times, mushrooms twice, and had recently begun experimenting with marijuana. It's also around this time that Kurt began experiencing occasional paranoia and general unease, which was likely not helped by the drug use he was undertaking. He said he had been stressed out for several weeks over the album, getting it recorded and released, which leads us, invariably, to the day of April 6, 1986. 20-year-old Kurt spent the day hanging out at a friend's apartment practicing with Enemy. A few of his friends had noticed that Kurt was a little off. He made claims that he was able to read people's minds and said he was feeling psychotic.
I started getting really paranoid. Everyone was out to get me. Things were not going right. It seemed I was really confused about everything. I was starting to formulate theories about robots, that we were just a bunch of robots, just here to build up the world.
The practice session wrapped up for the day, then morphed into a bit of a party as night fell, and Kurt decided to snort a line of cocaine. His friends began to tell him that something may have been added to the drugs, which resulted in Kurt becoming afraid in general and worried at the band's equipment specifically. I'm not sure what it was about their equipment that was causing him to worry. If he was afraid it would be stolen, it would spontaneously break, it would suddenly grow legs, start walking, learn to play itself, and render the human component of music redundant, or what. But concern was being felt. The most famous story attributed to Kurt, aside from the whole murder thing, tells how, during this fateful day, he noticed that someone in the apartment had rented a carpet shampooer, and Kurt decided it would be a fantastic idea to drink the cleaning fluid as he needed to clean himself out. Given he then proceeded to puke his guts up, we can chalk that one up to a success. Initially, I dismissed this as yet another heavy metal bullshit smoothie, so imagine my shock and surprise when I saw this written down in the psych reports I managed to get my hands on. So you heard it here, kids, confirmed beyond reasonable doubt. Kurt really did down a bottle of carpet shampoo. It didn't agree with him, but he did it. Yay! Kurt also decided it would be absolutely brilliant if he were to strip down to nothing, reportedly hugely embarrassing a female friend who caught the whole show. Well, I shouldn't say hugely, I don't know about hugely. I'm not really in any position to make comments about size, but she was, by all reports, very embarrassed.
Remember, the eggplant emoji is not just an eggplant.
He requested his friends take him home while still naked, which they did, only to realize once they got to his place that his keys were in his pants, which were back at his friend's house. Metalheads and keys, man, what the hell? Keys were duly fetched, and I'm assuming pants with them. Kurt said goodbye to his friends and went inside, still pantless. Well, maybe holding them, but certainly not wearing them, where he encountered his mother.
Mom tried to get me to relax and go to bed. I thought I'd die. I thought we were robots and could be replaced. I tried to go to sleep, and then I got up and committed the crime.
And by crime, Kurt is referring to the moment when his delusion took a violent turn and he decided to prove his theory by attacking his mother with a hatchet, then attempting to cut her open with a pair of scissors. I imagine he was somewhat horrified when, instead of the fiber optic cable and copper wire he was expecting, he found himself holding her blood-covered intestines.
This is so unsanitary. That's evidence, Mittens. You're rolling around in gooey, smelly evidence.
Darlee cried out that he was hurting her, but Kurt didn't seem to understand.
In a way, it seemed out of my body, like I was looking at myself. I remember thinking, we are a bunch of robots and she would be replaced. All I had to do was make the right call and the cleanup crew would come out and everything would be okay.
Kurt stumbled out of the apartment and wandered around the parking lot outside for a while. One report claimed that he was arrested while dancing naked and covered in blood on the front lawn. However, Kurt actually called 911 where he confessed to the murder and calmly waited for police to come and arrest him. But I guess the naked blood-soaked lawn dancing makes for a better story. Kurt called 911 at 17 minutes past midnight on April 7th, but hung up before his call was answered, so dispatch called him back.
Hello?
Mr. Struebing?
Yes, it is.
This is the King County Police. Is there any problem there? We had a 911 hang-up call.
Well, yeah, we have a problem here.
What is it?
Well, it's a re-unit.
What's re-unit?
It's a god job.
Pardon?
God job.
What's a god job?
Insanity.
What's going on?
I've killed my mother.
You just killed her now?
Yeah,
What did you use to kill her with?
an axe and scissors.
Okay. Is anyone else in the house with you?
No.
Okay. What is your first name?
Kurt.
Kurt?
Yeah,
What is your address?
you have it.
When did you do this?
Right now.
And it is just you and your mother in the house?
Yep. Actually, I'm by myself.
There's no one else in the house with you. Sir? Hello? Hung up.
Hello?
Kurt?
Yeah?
Hi, this is King County Police again.
Hi.
Say, I'm gonna have an officer come over and talk to you about this situation. Will you come outside and talk to him?
No, I'll be in here.
Why are you going to stay inside?
Because?
Because why? Kurt? Kurt?
Yeah?
Don't hang up the phone on me. What are you doing now?
Oh, I'm just going over some thoughts in my head.
Uh-huh.
Uh-huh.
What kind of thoughts?
Well, tell you what, send a psychiatrist over.
Send a psychiatrist.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I don't have one right now. I could probably get one in a little while, though. Can I send an officer in the meantime?
No.
No? Are you armed with anything, Kurt?
No.
Okay. What's the name of the apartment building here, do you know?
You know.
No, I don't know the name of it.
When police rocked up to the Struebing residence, they did indeed find Kurt outside, naked and covered in blood, but as mentioned, not dancing. His first words to them were,
I killed my mother and I killed myself.
Inside, they found Darlee in her bedroom, where Dr. Corinne Fleiter of the King County Medical Examiner's Office concluded that 53-year-old Darlee Kracht Struebing had died of massive head injuries from a cutting-type instrument. Despite his calm demeanor at the house and lack of resistance while being arrested, by the time he got to booking, Kurt had become mentally confused and physically out of control, eventually requiring being restrained and strapped down. He was admitted to Western State Hospital as he was clearly non-compos mentis and had to be carried onto the ward by 3 policemen and 3 staff as he was fighting and spitting. He was bruised, bleeding, and had a cut in the middle of his forehead, which I can't help but imagine that he got when he clocked himself with the hatchet on a rebound during the murder. Hey, I'm a terrible person, remember? Kurt was ordered to stay at the hospital for evaluation over 15 days, a stay which was extended by a further 20 for a total of 35 days. He was initially charged with first-degree murder and his bail was set at $200,000. During his time in the hospital, Kurt was medicated.
They give you something?
Oh yeah, they gave me everything.
And underwent various testings, including the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, the Millen Clinical Multi-Axel Inventory, a Rorschach test, and a Bender Gestalt test.
You made those words up.
Basically, they're all verbal tests which determine how crazy a person is based on their replies. The psychopath test, but shh, we're not supposed to use that word anymore.
I'm not a psychopath, Anderson. I'm a high-functioning sociopath. Do your research.
Kurt faced evaluation by several doctors who mostly just read each other's notes and all landed on the same diagnosis. While fit to stand trial, Kurt was clinically insane during the commission of the murder. 2 out of 3 reports say Kurt's mental state was a one-off and unlikely to recur, whereas the third, and there always has to be someone who goes against the grain of the group, doesn't they? stated,
"It is my further opinion that Kurt Struebing does continue to constitute a danger. Having once experienced a psychotic reaction, it is quite possible that it could recur if he were to be exposed to similar precipitating factors."
Which I believe is known as the once cracked, twice shy theory of psychology, and completely ignores the fact that every person is capable of losing it and going total Lizzie Borden in the right, or, well, I suppose technically wrong, circumstances.
40 whacks with a wet noodle, Bart!
And for those of you wondering about my credentials, I'll have you know I got my psychology degree from Armchair University. None of that kitchen chair community college for me. No. I went to an Ivy League armchair, thank you very much. Reading Kurt's evaluations are rather revealing of the era in which they were written. Given this was the 80s, America was right in the middle of the satanic panic, and it shows.
Listen to heavy metal music. The devil will make you kill your mom.
For those who aren't familiar with the Satanic Panic, it was a moral panic which was a result of changing times. After the economic boom of the post-war 50s and the free love of the 60s, Americans started to come down from their high and realize that life ain't all cars and sex. So during the 70s, the optimism faded as horror movies, heavy metal, and anti-government sentiment began to rise. These reports all make mention of Kurt's rock music interest, and completely fail to understand that it's just music, it's just an image, just fun, and not in any way indicative of his mental state or personal philosophical leanings. But this was an era of music bad, so naturally everything had a deeper meaning. In one of his evaluations, I found this glorious sentence.
"I felt that he did use denial, especially in his rejection of the possible connection between his song lyrics and his view of life."
Because of course Kurt wouldn't be the one to know if there was a connection between his lyrics and his life. I mean, he was the one who wrote them, but what would he know? No. If the expert says there's a connection, there must be a connection, despite that the guy actually who wrote it has said there's no frickin' connection. Kurt refuted this in an interview he gave after his release.
All of my infractions with the law really have nothing to do with the band.
But my personal favorite is the mention of Kurt's homosexual panic. Supposedly, Kurt was worried that he was gay, or that he would be thought of as being gay, and since this was the 80s, homosexual panic was genuinely believed to be a serious concern, to the extent that some people were able to obtain lesser sentences or even no charges at all for attacking and or murdering gay people who had hit on them. Luckily, in Kurt's case, this was just a passing thought and not at all relevant to his crime. However, I thought it interesting enough to mention, and certainly indicative of the time in which all of this occurred. Now, for the elephant in the room, there have been claims that Kurt sexually interfered with his mother's body. The only evidence I could find for this was a statement that Kurt supposedly made to an orderly at the hospital during his committal. As I couldn't find a coroner's report, I couldn't confirm this one way or the other. But as Kurt was permitted to plead down to second-degree murder, I'm disinclined to believe this part of the story. Kurt was eventually found mentally competent enough to stand trial and pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. Despite both the defense and prosecution requesting a sentence of 8 years, the judge ordered him to serve 12 years in the mentally ill offenders unit of Monroe Reformatory. Don't you love name their prisons? Oh no, it's not a prison. No, it's a reformatory. So by the time he comes out, he'll be reformed. He has to. He went to a reformatory. The clue is in the name. Also, as a completely irrelevant random aside, prisoners at this particular institution rioted back in April 2020 after it became the first state prison with confirmed cases of COVID-19. It wasn't much of a riot, though. That's a hyperbolic headline the media used, as the so-called riot lasted less than 3 hours. Everyone knows a real riot has to last a minimum of 6 hours and involve a certain level of random violence and destruction. Come on, guys, I've seen Canadians do better when there's no hockey involved. Due to Kurt's legal trouble, Unholy Death was pulled from some record store shelves, which massively impacted sales and caused what had been a promising start to fail faster than Elon Musk's management of Twitter. Darlee's body was sent back to her family's home city of San Diego, and she was interred in Greenwood Memorial Park. Kurt served 8 of his 12-year sentence, and in 1994, when he was released, friends stated he really did seem a completely different person, with many new friends he made post-prison reacting with disbelief when they learned of his felonious past, which Kurt made a point of not mentioning very often.
Not gonna talk about that.
Welcoming it all over your body.
Keep it to yourself.
Welcoming your brains out.
Hush now.
He was described as a very kind, generous, and funny man who would help out anyone who reached out to him. Enemy reunited within months of Kurt's release and recorded a new album, War Machine 95, within a year. They played a few clubs and small concerts and got a manager, Lisa Bonner. When she expressed interest in representing the group, Kurt took her aside and explained his past to her, as he was concerned she would face questions and backlash over her decision to represent them. Kurt told her he wanted her to hear the story directly from him and gave her a few days to think it over. Lisa thought it over, and the next day she called to say she didn't care what he'd done in the past. He'd clearly changed and she wanted to represent Enemy. If she were confronted or questioned, Kurt had asked that she reply with, "That's the past and Kurt's done his time." His father died in 1995, but on June 29, 1996, Kurt married a woman named Angie, and the two welcomed a son in the year 2000 whom they named Jared. Kurt got a job in a printing place and would often print off flyers for local gigs at his own expense. He started a company with Angie and Lisa called Siren Spawn, which covered everything from management and promotion to tours, helping musicians access recording labels, musician insurance, band business consulting, as well as organizing various events. 2002 saw the release of Enemy's third studio album, Vermination, which I was unable to find any pirated version of on or off YouTube, which really annoyed me. So if anyone watching this has a copy, please upload it. In February of 2004, Siren Spawn organized an event to honor a local metal guitarist, John Sully Sullivan, who had died while serving in Iraq. Sully had been the go-to guy for anyone who needed an experienced guitarist at short notice, and he was known in the local metal scene for his incredible shredding skills. The event also helped raise money for Sully's widow and the twin sons he never had the chance to meet. Siren Spawn also organized an event to help raise money in support of a music promoter who had been badly injured in a car crash. Or it might have been a boat-related injury. Either way, a vehicle was involved, some people got hurt, and couldn't afford the bills. Gotta love that privatized American healthcare. With a changed attitude, a new family, a stable job, and continuing to be a figure in the local music scene through Siren Spawn and Enemy, you might be forgiven for thinking that this would be one episode of Murdered by Metal where it didn't get worse. But it does. It does. It gets worse. Just when things seemed to be working out so well, friends, family, and fans were shocked when the news broke that Kurt had died in a car incident on March 9th, 2005, at the age of 39. What makes it even worse, because this is Murdered by Metal after all, is that there's always been a question about whether this was a case of a driver losing control of his vehicle, an indication that Kurt had fallen back into drug use, or if Kurt's death was a deliberate suicide. Because the thing is, Kurt drove off the edge of the Spokane swing bridge in his Volkswagen Jetta. Jetta? Jetta. It is Jetta, right? I don't care, it's a car, whatever. This is a swing bridge that passes over the Duwamish waterway. The bridge splits down the middle, and each end pivots when ships and barges need to pass underneath. Traffic is stopped and barriers are lowered to ensure no one's tempted to fast and furious this bitch. In order for Kurt's car to have dropped off the edge, he had driven past several cars also waiting for the bridge to swing back and crash through two closed barriers. Kurt's car fell 50 feet down to a road below the bridge and died on impact. None of the reports or articles I found mentioned anything about a suicide note, and while some did speculate as to whether he had restarted his drug abuse, nothing was ever definitively stated one way or the other. I was unable to find any record of where Kurt had been buried, whether he'd been cremated or otherwise interred. If anyone out there knows what happened to Kurt's earthly remains, and can somehow prove it, please let me know and I'll be sure to add it to the description box below. I was, however, able to find a copy of Kurt's obituary. Kurt Alan Struebing left us unexpectedly on March 9th, 2005 at the tender young age of 39. Kurt is survived by his loving wife Angie and his adoring son Jared. Kurt is loved and will be missed as a very loving, trusted, and devoted brother, uncle, grandson, and friend of many too enormous to list, and son-in-law to Roger and Debbie and Michael and Donna. Kurt's contributions to the local music industry had an enormous impact on the Seattle community. Kurt is also survived by Enemy band members Scott, Steve, Brian, and longtime friend Scott Woody. Please join the family for a memorial service Sunday, March 20th, 2005, with a celebration of life to follow. A benefit honoring Kurt will be held on March 18, 2005 from 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. hosted by Siren Spawn Entertainment at the Old Shipwreck in Tacoma, Washington. Kurt and Darlee's case is somewhat unique compared with the majority of other heavy metal-related murder and violent cases. This wasn't about reputation, prejudice, or even just good old-fashioned religion. This is a case of a young man suffering from mental illness who lost control one night with devastating consequences. I do not doubt his changed personality had everything to do with Kurt's personal work on himself and wasn't due to some kind of lock him up for a dozen years, that'll learn him and he was magically cured mentality. Or some kind of radical Clockwork Orange cornea destroying undergoing treatment. In a 21st century world, hopefully Kurt would have gotten the help he needed before he got to breaking point. But in a 1980s world, mental health wasn't really a thing. Whatever happened in prison, Kurt was able to sort his shit out and become a productive member of society. Regardless of whether he did commit suicide or whether his car did suffer some incredibly weird mechanical fault, his is a sad loss, not only to his family and friends, but to metal and music as well. While Kurt had never intended for Enemy to be more than a hobby, he helped create a wonderful fusion of some really great styles into a collection of amazing songs. It makes me sad to consider the music we lost when he died. Kurt was a firm supporter of bootlegs, and it's a real shame that his works aren't easily found. You'll find some links in the description box below to Unholy Death and War Machine 95, but I've not managed to find a copy of Vermination or any of Night Prowler's demos for love nor money. If you have a copy or know anyone who does, I encourage you to upload them. If you don't want the hassle, send me a copy and I'll do it for you, you lazy bastard.
I'll do it myself.
Let's keep Kurt's memory alive by sharing his music.
Hear ye, hear ye!
I am happy to announce I now have a Patreon, with some pretty nifty benefits for members. Check it out, join up, support me in making these videos, and see what mischief we can get up to once we're able to start interacting and badly influencing each other. You know, the way good parasocial friends do. Thanks again for watching. Initially this script was really short and filled with way more sarcasm. Difficult to imagine, I know. Until I was able to get my hands on official court documents and finally get a better view of this whole story. It was super exciting to see those documents. This is the first video where I've had that kind of info, and I gotta give the most massive of massive shoutouts to Castle Dragon for doing the legwork to get them and send them to me. You are a scholar and a gentleman and the second best swordsman in all of France. And a big thank you to Chris for putting me in touch with Devin, and of course to Devin for answering my massive list of assorted questions regarding Kurt. Also, gratuitous gratitude to the users over at the RBI subreddit for their help in researching this case. I couldn't have done it without you. As well as the usual like, subscribe, comment bullshit. Patreon, please. Until next time, stay safe, have fun, and when the robot uprising happens and the war begins, make sure that the humanoid you're trying to kill really is a robot by presenting them with an unsolvable paradox which will cause their hard drive to crash and their head to explode, instead of going all Villisca on their ass. It's less messy that way.